My brother Tomas, welcome to the show, the Realize Today podcast. It's been an honor getting to know you, brother, over the last few months or more, probably more like 6 months or so. And welcome, brother. Welcome to the show. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, man. It's good to be here.
Yeah.
Happy to be here.
And so, I love so much of your writing and the work that you've been posting and just kind of how you show up in the world. And something that caught my attention recently, and where I'd love to start is you wrote something on Instagram. I was like, the suffering is the trailhead to your expansion. And maybe those weren't the exact words, but I have such a similar viewpoint on life, and so many people I talk to have a similar story and similar opinions on how their suffering was a gift. And I would just love to know a little bit about your story and about how your suffering led to your expansion.
Where do I begin? Yeah, I mean, that's a tricky one. I'm trying to figure out where that first trailhead was.
Yeah. Well, I know that there's been plenty, and we've had so many conversations around addiction and escapism and, just those points in our life when things led us to choose something different,
Yeah, I mean, it's been kind of it was a long journey before I actually said yes to exploring that trailhead, I guess. I think a lot of my discomfort really got loud in my teen years. And then I started to fall into more addictive habits and patterns like the latter half of my teens, and it really started amplifying in my early 20s and kept going all the way up until I was about 30. And it, it trickled on beyond that. But it's been just a lot of exploring, and I'm not sure where to start with that because there's just so many things happening, all the time. And
what are some of the things that you've been exploring and modalities that you've implemented into your life that have really helped you live a life of devotion? Because that's really what I feel when I connect with you. You seem very, very devoted, and I really respect the way you show up in that way.
I will say that I think there was a time in my life where I was just really frustrated, and I didn't really know what to do with it. I wanted to, be more creative. This is what I was focusing on anyways. I wanted to be. I had these ideas that I wanted to be a musician or, a visual artist, or I felt, and a lot of that was kind of attached to my worth too. But what ended up happening was, I think a lot of this started with a few things. One of them being a relationship that served as a catalyst in my life. That took me by force a little bit. I cared a lot about it. Something outside of myself. And
a romantic relationship.
Yeah. And after having been in that relationship, I started to there was a moment where I recognized that I wasn't showing up in a good way. I wasn't able to keep my emotions in check. I was acting in ways that I couldn't hold. I wasn't in charge, and I was being completely overrun by my unconscious, by these old wounds and stuff. So I was able to step away from my main avenue of escape, which was alcoholism. I took a full month break, and it was wild because in that month it was really empowering. Because at the time, one of my best friends, closest drinking partners, friend, it was his birthday in that month that I decided to not drink, but I still went to hang out with him and the other friends for his birthday. But I didn't have a drop of alcohol. While meanwhile they're drinking at some point. You know, they're also doing some other substances in a not so good way, in my opinion, which I used to partake too. There's no judgment at all.
Yeah.
We have to go through what we have to go through. And then my sister's wedding was that month, and I didn't drink at all. My older brother was like, dude, have some champagne. I was like, dude, no, man, like this is for me, you know? And he's like, but it's her wedding. And I was like, oh, yeah, I know. I want to remember it. I'm going to remember the whole thing. And he ended up getting wasted, and I ended up dancing more than anyone on the dance floor at that wedding. And, it was interesting to like be in that space completely sober, because I was in the ceremony, or at least this wedding, and like every conversation I felt around me with all these people who I could tell didn't feel comfortable with themselves and with each other would just crack jokes about getting drunk the whole time, and I was just like, oh man, this isn't good. This is weird.
Yeah, it's amazing how I always like to think that our resistance that we face always comes from within. But it's amazing in the world of addiction, when we are participating in escapist activities with other people, the resistance actually comes from other people as well.
Yeah.
You could feel their resistance, and because you, by doing that, shows them a piece of themselves that they don't exactly want to look at.
Yeah. It throws the world off, because the way I see it is our reality is just like, it's not just, it's just like infinite systems and cycles working together, like gears in a machine. But if I'm going to change a gear, it's going to have to change how the rest of the machine works, which is their life or my life, and if I'm changing my dynamic, that means they're going to have to make an adjustment, which that's the discomfort, is the fact that change is coming. But we don't, oftentimes, especially if we're in a lifestyle of numbing and escaping, like it's hard to look at things, and we're not even aware that we're afraid of change. But later that year, I went to a men's retreat. I did this really deep shadow work exercise within that men's retreat. And then the next morning, I had a very fortunate and beautiful and powerful and I don't know, so many things. It was an experience. I met the toad of the Sonoran Desert, Bufo alvarius, 5-MeO-DMT, aka the God molecule.
Oh yeah.
I got to have I was the only person that was served, and I was in the middle of the California desert, and it was like I was invited through the trailhead at that moment, because I had already been invited to drink ayahuasca with my partner at the time in a few months for her birthday, but I was hesitating, and but after that I was like, okay, if I can do that, where I thought I was dying and I made it through and it's beautiful and I experienced this level of bliss that I never had before, I was like, okay, I can drink ayahuasca too. I'm ready for it. And then since then, it's just been like learning how to walk in a whole new way. Yeah.
I love that metaphor, because it's, when you first start working with these medicines, it's almost like everything gets stripped from you, and you realize that you're just, an infant, and really learning how to crawl, learning how to walk. I still feel like I'm in those phases, and that's beautiful. And then so you went on, and you mentioned that experience with that group, and I believe I've seen a picture. It looked really, really potent, and it looked like you had a very powerful release. And I never asked you about what that experience was actually like. What were you releasing in those moments?
Yeah, it was was a potent time of catharsis. I released a lot. So the way the exercise worked was, there's like a circle of men, maybe there's like 15 of us. And then we all took turns going into the center, and then there were 2 facilitators. And they're standing like in my bubble, within a foot or 2 of me. And it's my time to just share. What's going on? What am I hiding? What am I afraid to look at? What am I afraid to talk about? And like, I'm there to do that, so I can't hide. So, and as I was sharing things, they're pulling things out. I don't really remember a whole lot. Well, maybe. I think I just shared some pains I had around like my parents, some disconnect there. I shared some actually frustrations I had with my social circles, like the guys in my life at the time. I felt off about how they would actually speak about women, and I didn't like it. There was like a little bit of like objectification and misogyny and these kinds of things, and it just was always felt off in me, but I didn't know how to like address it, or even that it was okay that I could feel this way. Like I didn't really have yet. I wasn't able to embody the disagreement. So yeah, I mean, during that practice, it was like I cried, I like screamed out some anger, and then they were guiding me through like, okay, well, like, change is available. Isn't that exciting? That kind of approach. And then so there was like excitement, I was like pumped up, like, let's go. But through all these emotions, which I had previously needed alcohol to like really be able to show any parts of myself. So I would, like part of the, medicine of this practice too is like, okay, here am I falling apart. Here I am falling apart, so to speak, and showing all these vulnerable parts of myself, expressing myself in a very vulnerable way. And then I look up, and then there's these like really just like strong dudes right in front of me, and they're looking right at my eye, looking at me directly in my eyes with like compassion, joy, approval, acceptance, embrace, validation, like all these things. Like I was like, oh, I'm seeing, whoa, this is weird. And maybe some of them I maybe felt small near, because I don't know, they're just like look like really strong dudes, but they're just like, it's cool, bro, it's okay. And that was a huge awakening moment for me too. Kind of shifted like what's important for me. And so going forth from there, it was like, okay, my current life situation, all these systems and gears in my own life, they're not working anymore. I'm gonna have to do some work to like change that up, because something's missing. So cue in the continuation of seeking and cleaning, purification, all those things.
It's amazing how when we can go and we can do all these inner work on our own, and it's a lot of times easier than going into that world of authentic relating and being vulnerable and being seen by people with all our flaws, with all our weaknesses, with all our hurt, with all our pain. But that's really where the healing is, at least where I've experienced it for myself. When I can be seen in that, it's like massive weight just drops off my shoulders.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'd love to touch upon the aspect of men and relating to women, because I experience a lot of what you were talking about, where social circles, there's still a lot of misogyny and just men looking at women as something to conquer, and almost still like having that misogyny and like wanting to conquer as many women as possible, and for years that was one of the first things that I also felt misaligned with me was some of the community I was around. And I had trouble addressing that too. And then, integrating that into my life. And oftentimes, when that stuff would come up in conversation, I'm sure there were times I would partake, but there were very often times when I felt just like awkward and kind of would go silence. And that became my way of dealing with it, until I decided kind of to, speak up on some things, or to, maybe separate myself from people, because it's not our job to change anyone. And I'm curious how you dealt with that, how you integrated that into your life.
I guess I just started to more so look for and follow and say yes to things that felt good to me, even if they were scary and unknown. And so part of that time period was stepping away from my alcoholism, which was the bonding agent of my network at the time. I've been a bartender for years, so I've worked in restaurants, and a lot of the energy around eating out and going. I've always worked at restaurants, not so much at bars, but there's still this like, that's the, it's like, it's interesting because, I've seen people, groups, communities, and they're connected through like sacraments, like medicines and things like that, which they're using in a way to be better, to each other, to themselves, to the earth. But alcohol is like, it's the same. It's like serving the same purpose, but it just comes with so much extra. It doesn't really support the like inner alchemy in a way. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it does in a way because it reflects back all the darkness and stuff that's within us too. So, over time, I think I just, it's been like a lot of like a theme in my life of just trying to just, calling in and making decisions to surround myself with people who are more in alignment with my values. Mm-hmm. Like I can understand, I feel like I understand why there is this objectification of women, this using of them. And, I think misogyny is just like an expression of the objectification. Mm-hmm. It's like not really seeing them as humans, but rather like a way to meet needs, or they're using, this happens across so many dynamics in humans, but like treating each other as a means to an end.
Yeah, and it makes me think too, like it's not even, maybe it's just more of a human issue of connecting with other people and really seeing them and living with compassion. And maybe it's just not only to do with how, opposite sexes relate to each other, particularly men to women, but also how men to relate to men. Mm-hmm. In our culture with, the way things seem to go sometimes is like we take and take and take, and we don't really often think about people on the other end of that. And in business and chasing money and trying to gain popularity and trying to chase love in all the wrong ways. We often seem to lose compassion in that, and maybe a basic leaning into compassion is the answer. And just, you would never just use and discard someone else who you see and you honor as a unique expression of God,
Yeah. I think the shift really happens too when there is also these things offered to ourselves. Like a teacher of mine has offered this kind of paradigm, this perspective of the way that he worded it to really address like the men and women thing is a man treats the world the same way he treats his penis. And there's a lot to unpack there, but like think about there's like a disconnect that I think a lot of men have, and it's like orgasms feel good, we can release stress, we can feel better for a moment, right? And porn always makes us want to do that. So it's like this, it can be this, for those men who have had this, early this addiction to porn, I am one of them, not anymore, but it's like this objectification of the self, like, and me treating my body as a means to an end too. Like, oh, I'm not having a good day, let me just go, release myself so I can have a better day or feel better or something like that. So I'm using myself, and it's not even about like, there's so much more available to lean into and to work on when it comes to like exploring sexuality and expression and orgasms. Like there's expansion available, there's healing, there's touch, like there's self-love, there's all these things that I'm experiencing in myself through some of the work I've done, and I've been shown and taught, like it's not about like, there's so much about like that climax point, like let's get to that point, let's get the objective done, but instead like we're like missing a whole journey. And I was talking to someone last night about it, like like sex is amazing, right? It can be such a beautiful thing, and even like self-pleasure can be beautiful. Why don't we look at it like our favorite piece of music? Are we just like, I can't wait till the end of the song? No, like let's enjoy the whole thing. I love, like there's some, sure, there's some beautiful song has multiple different levels of harmony, and there's the low points, and maybe there's like the build up, and then it comes back, but then it's like it's a wave, and we like it all, if it's a good one and it really touches our heart. So why are we always like in the bedroom or at home in front of the computer, like I gotta get to the end of the song,
Yeah,
like no, let's choose a different song.
One of the biggest switches for me in that was when I started really practicing retention.
Yeah.
And then, so anytime I would have sex, nothing was about, a climax. Mm-hmm. It was just, obviously thinking about that for her. But it just because it didn't exist there. Yeah. I had nothing to do but to be present with the energy there. And then, things got really complex in like a beautiful way from there, because I was able to be really present with the energy. And then, there's so much powerful energy there that can be used for our systems to charge us up, and not just to discard and let go of. Yeah. And, the whole time while you're in that fucking beautiful place of connectedness, be thinking about the end. And I think one of the loops that I got caught up in, when I've talked to a lot of guys get caught up in, is the idea of how am I performing? And you just want to get to that end point where things went well and, you pleasured them, and it becomes a trap because you can't be present, and your effort is, you're desiring to like really being attached to the outcome and putting in effort and trying hard, like destroys the intimacy of the moment.
Yeah. You're not being authentic. You're not being present when you're in those modes. You're trying to be something else, which you're not being you in the moment, which is, requires practice and awareness and sometimes teaching and guidance.
Yeah. And they can totally feel that, whoever you're with.
Yeah. And I've been leaning into these ways too of not wanting to release, wanting to, retain. And I had a experience with a woman at some point along that journey, and she was confused by me. She was like, "Oh, it's weird. Like every other, like, why don't you want to release?" Like in like a kind of, it felt kind of like she was kind of concerned about it, but also like intrigued too. And I think I noticed within her a little bit of like desire too to like support that, like because like that's what she, that's what she thinks that I would want too, and like that means that it's good too. So I think there's there's a lot of healing available if we all lean into these ways too, for not just men but also the women, and because if we're having a intimate physical, sensual, sexual experience with somebody, we're sharing this moment, and there's, like you were talking about, building up energy, and if we give that energy to like the rest of our body, and we can use it and just be like so fully in it, there's so much more available that I've only just started to scratch the surface in that in my experience. But
and it makes me think, like, there's been so many moments where I am going down that road, and it's really beautiful, and it's like, I'm doing it because I feel it's right. And it's like, it feels like self-sacrifice, but what you're sacrificing is not even close to what you're going to gain from like the closeness in that space. Because there's a certain, what I believe, like, the women I've been with in these spaces, they get very, very attracted to that strength and being able to control your urges, and to be there, not just to have a release, but to be present with them. And they love that. They seem to, at least. And so, I believe maybe it's them, maybe they feel safer in that. And whatever that does for the energy in the space, everything just becomes so enhanced. Like, there's more of an opportunity to merge with the other person, and not just, be rubbing bodies together to ejaculate, or have an orgasm, but to actually have a deeply spiritual, connected merging with another human being.
Yeah. And that, like, it sounds counterintuitive, but you're talking about like the sometimes performative, projected nature that maybe some men have, and women too, I'm sure, around like, oh, I need to like be this good in bed, right? I'm not like this narrative like, oh, if I can't make her come, I'm not worthy, that kind of thing. But like, that's also a task. We're not really present with what's actually here. I'm trying to get there. So it's also this like, for it to really work, both parties, it doesn't have to be men and women, it can be men and men, women too, but like both parties involved need to, I think, need to be able to share this vision, to let go, to do their own work, to let go of the need to get to an orgasm, because an orgasm, like, or the idea, an orgasm feels great. It's one of the best things. And can we let go of both of us trying to get there and just be with what is right now? Because like, just breathe into the moment and take time, and it doesn't have to look like the aggressive and just like super thrusty videos that we see on the internet. I mean, sure, moments can be like that too, and there's a time and a place, and it's fine, nothing wrong with that. But like, also these other ways are, I think, have so many benefits that we haven't been taught, and there's like ancient teachings around them too in the East. So there's just so much exploring that we as a whole need to explore.
Yeah, that's a really good point about the women, and to have a shared mindset about that, because I tend to talk about what I can own for me, but when I look back on my experiences, I've fell into that trap multiple times where I am tying my experience to my function to make someone orgasm. And some of my most healing moments have been when that's felt in the space, and they, you know, whoever that partner was, you know, would maybe bring that up and be like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if I do or if I don't. Like, we're here to have this experience. And it was so healing for me. And then it's like, oh, okay. Like, I can let go of all expectation, of all performance anxiety, and just like really honor this connection. And the sex doesn't even matter, but you know, the merging of our energies and the connection is what matters.
Yeah. And there's so much of it like attached to worth, right? Like, oh, I need to prove my worth as a man to get, if I can't, you know, like I said earlier, if I can't make her have her release, then, and if I release too early, then I'm performing to either not make that happen or make that happen. Then my worth is like, I'm needing her to validate me.
Yeah.
And again, that's using her. And look, if that's where we're at that time in our lives, that's fine. Look at it as a reflection. We don't need to shame ourselves for having this like mode around like, oh, I'm still stuck in this like needing to validate her. It's like, okay, whoa, interesting. Let's get curious about it. What is it that needs to get validated? Why am I needing this? Where can I like, you know, validate, like where can I validate myself a little better? Where can I love myself a little better so that I'm not coming to this needing something? Instead, it's like, I can use that as a reflection, and then I can work on myself and then come to it a little more whole, a little more integrated.
Yeah, it's funny because sometimes we enter that space with this feeling of, I want to be so selfless and I just want to be the best so that I can make her feel the most pleasure, but it's just not coming from that clean place. No. It's coming from that wounded place of, I need to do this in order to feel worthy. And it's, you know, foolishly, you know, in a trickery blindly sort of way. It's selfish.
It's tough too, man. I think, like I said, it's important to have the partner that's willing to do the work too, because I mean, I wasn't in a space to lead it before, but like, you know, a partnership I had in the past, like, she would get pissed at me if she didn't have her release, and I ended up having mine. Especially because it always it always happened like right when she's about to, and we had like theories around like biologically why that happened. But like she's about to, you know, have her moment, and I'm like, fuck, you know, like, here I go. And she'd be pissed, and I would just feel like I would just acquire all this shame, and it would just feed this already untended to story around me not being worthy. So,
and it's low key traumatizing. You know? Truly, it's sexual trauma.
It is.
And you know, I knew someone back in the day in high school, and you know, they were dating, and she kicked him out of the house because he came early and didn't make her come. And oh my God, just like traumatizing to experience. And it's like the type of thing where if you don't go back into and you know, feel those feelings and go into the root, that's going to be sexual trauma that you carry with you forever.
Yeah. So
yeah, I'd love to get into a little bit more about being in community and authentic relating in community. It's been such a key piece of my life. Particularly, it first started with men's groups, and you know, just practicing showing up as my authentic self on a weekly basis. And you know, it's almost like this thing that I feel we have to keep showing up to. You know, it never gets to the point where it's like, okay, we're there, but it seems like a constant practice of, you know, as we deepen ourselves, how can we keep showing up in a way that's true to ourselves? And, you know, I still sometimes struggle to show up as my full self in certain communities. But I know that the key is in just leaning into those fears and, you know, really inquiring about like, what am I afraid of? And what is keeping me from showing up in my full self. And I'm curious on your journey, what type of role has authentic relating played? I know we talked about that incredible experience you had at that retreat, and that feels like it might have been the start of that type of work for you. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about that.
I feel like for my own life, a big experience, a big theme of my journey of healing and self-actualization, individuation, as Jung called it. It's just about like being whole, showing up, and being present, being there, and not hiding. Hiding can look like lying. It can look like staying, like biting your tongue, not speaking out. It can look like putting on a mask. It can look like saying something that you don't actually feel just so you can fit in and agree. And we, and those, I've done those things, and I'm sure other people do it too. They would to do these things, these hiding tactics, because there's like a wound, or there's fear, there's something that's unintegrated. So like being able to work with the fears and the wounds, and feeling whatever pain has been buried, and rewriting stories, rewriting social cultural programs. Through all that, I've been able to just be more myself and show up and disagree with people sometimes, and like comfortably, and not be afraid of that, but in a way that's respectful. Like I don't need to fight anyone. In that way, if there's a disagreement, it's like it's not going to get anywhere. But if in a intimate relationship, I've experienced like these moments of sharing some things that I've been terrified to share, that in the past I've had similar experiences, and I hid, I lied, I avoided, and that only poisoned my cycles in my life, my rhythms in life. I only suffered more. But leaning in and just being seen in my humanness, and then being accepted and being received, and being like, when I can do it without like really needing anything from the other person, just like, okay, this is where I'm at. And I can, maybe touch on some relative specifics around that, but I walk away always feeling nourished. I always feel stronger. I feel more myself. I feel like more confident. I feel bigger, like energetically, maybe physically, and that translates to how I feel physically too, and more capable in life too.
Yeah, I feel like one of the major blockages is, just in the human psyche from evolution, is fear of isolation, fear of rejection from the tribe. And I think that this is so deeply entwined in our psyches. Mm-hmm. And I see it show up for me, just kind of in the background sometimes of, as a motivator of like, maybe don't show this part of myself, maybe don't cause a commotion when I see something that's, might feel a little out of alignment. And, it's just fear from being rejected from the tribe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's like a biological wiring from what I've learned, or what I've been shown. Like, it's a healthy response. It's like it was designed through our evolution to, not be ostracized, because that would often mean death. Mm-hmm. But now that's not really a thing. Now it just means it might lead to like grief and sadness and pain. Mm-hmm. That but at the end of the day, if I'm being honest, respectfully, taking ownership of how I feel, being increasingly conscious about my projections and things like that. And a community rejects me, then is that my community in the first place? Mm-hmm. Do I need to hang out with them? I don't know. I mean, I think like in being honest and like super authentic about things, it just it like guides, like life will just kind of guide us to what's important, what's going to work for us, because then we're becoming a match. You know, like otherwise if I'm hiding, if I'm like lying and stuff, I'm going to be a match for this reality that matches my dishonesty.
Yeah.
Instead of like who I actually am or what I actually feel about things.
Yeah, I want to talk a little about, because you show up in such a good way, you know, in your, you know, dedication to truth, honesty, integrity, and just showing up in a good way. You know, it's, you know, I could feel that it's just a choice that you made, you know, this is how I'm going to show up. And this is what I'm committed to. I really feel that in your energy, you know, every time I interact with you, and it's really refreshing. And, you know, I know you talk a lot about integration too. And, you know, in this world now, you know, there's so much talk around plant medicine and psychedelics and entheogenics and, you know, so much experiencing those peak moments. But everything really is about integration. You know, I've had experiences where I will get the same lesson multiple times in a row. It's just like it hasn't integrated yet. Perhaps too much medicine and not enough integration. And so, you know, you talk about integration in such a beautiful way. And I could see that, you know, just even in the 6 months that I've known you, like I've seen so much growth and, you know, integration happen in the way that you show up, and a lot of the ways in which I've heard you talk about it, you know, really, really speak to me. And so, yeah, I'd love to, you know, learn a little bit about your journey with integrating, you know, after you have a big journey, you know, what might be the process of integrating that, and so that, you know, you can show up in a way that is truthful, honest, in integrity, because it's almost like until we integrate, you know, there's kind of like a blockage in showing up that way.
Yeah. I feel like we can have a whole episode about that alone.
Yeah.
There's a lot there. A few things come to mind. Try to weave them together. You know, like peak experiences, altered states of consciousness, mystical experiences through entheogens, psychedelics, plant medicine, amphibian medicine, fungi medicine, breath work, you know, fasting, lengthy fasting, all these things. We can get like really profound insights through them, and messages and wisdom, and, you know, wisdom, knowledge, perspectives, all these things. I think it was Alan Watts. He had a quote. He said once upon a time, he said, like psychedelics are to the psyche like a telescope, or a microscope is to the scientist. Like, you use them to, like, you gotta go and you look, take a look, and you go work on what you saw. You know, like, you don't, the scientist doesn't sit there with his eyes glued to the microscope. He takes his notes and then he goes and works on it, you know? So in one way that these medicines and these altered states work, they can show, you know, they can show us what's important. They can show us parts of ourselves, or things we're doing that maybe we've been blind to because our shadows are running the show, our unconscious is running the show. So they can serve, these visions can serve as a trailhead to like where my work is. And I, in the past, struggled to listen. They all, you know, these medicines work in other ways too. Like my current relationship to some of them, I don't really go to for insights anymore. I kind of go to them process things, to feel stuff, and to like grieve things, because they can help me access some really deep states of safety, so I can process some emotions in a good way.
So you mean approaching the ceremony with intention to go into a specific thing that you've kind of already dug up and is present?
Maybe, like, it kind of feels hygienic sometimes. Like, for me, a really good, reliable practice has been solo journeying with mushrooms. In my house, lights out, maybe some peaceful journey music, some soundscapey type stuff. And things come up, I start to like look at my life, and maybe I see how I was out of alignment. Maybe I see where I was acting out of integrity. Maybe I'm pissed off at someone in my life because they're being they're being a certain way, but maybe there's actually just some really deep sadness behind it. So in these journeys, I've been able to like actually feel some sadness instead. Like, I'm hesitant to share this because you might listen, but I'll say it anyways. Like, I had this, living with my dad, at a later time in my life now, and we operate very differently, and I was kind of feeling like some frustration with him because of the way that he is. He's busy and stuff, and and then I took some mushrooms, and I realized I was just really sad because I wanted a closer relationship with him. But it was dressed as this anger approach, but the mushrooms, through a journey, I was like, oh man, I'm just like grieving now because I know life is short and fragile, and I actually like just really want more of a connection with him. So that's an example.
Did you go and have a conversation with him about that?
A little bit, to an extent. I didn't share that experience with him, but maybe I could someday. I mean, but I've expressed things also. Yeah. I've expressed some like frustrations or desires that I hope for, more closeness and things like that.
Yeah, I think one of the powers of these tools is like ability to feel empathy. I found it to be huge in my experiences with family healing too, with my mother and father, to be able to put yourselves in their world and like, the pain that, the anger that I might feel, I don't, it's not present now, but that have felt, there's pain behind that for me. And for them, it's like, if there's pain for me, there's also, we're in a relationship, and, they're in some role of that as well. And, that pain is like equal and opposite for them, in some way, very often. And so, yeah, to be able to see that and feel that and, approach those things with grace and compassion is like, super important, and just such a beautiful way to bring closeness, with people you love.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, the psychedelics can really open that up. And I love the metaphor that you used with the zooming in the microscope, and then it's like, okay, like, I see this, and now it's time to, get to work. But I also, on another level, I almost see it also as, in a completely separate metaphor, a zooming out. It's almost like,
absolutely.
It's like zooming in and zooming out, and you get all the perspectives except that narrow ego perspective that you're always getting. It's like,
it feels like coming into union with experience, like all together. It feels like I'm not separate from it.
Yeah,
which I think, the ego itself, which is a beautiful tool if we work with it right. Through the psychedelic experience, the ego kind of surrenders. It kind of like lets go of control. It kind of, because the ego is designed, the way I see it is, and other people do too, is to help us get our needs met, to ensure safety and security, and protection, which includes protection. So, and it develops because it served a purpose at some point. So a lot of the integration process of shadows and the healing journey is to like reprogram the ego, so it can actually support our opening of the heart, so it can support its own surrender. So the way psychedelics, I think they work, there's a lot of talk about ego death, but it's really like the ego doesn't die. It just kind of takes a step back and like watches instead. And what it does is it watches like the soul kind of work through, kind of relate to the experience instead of the ego and its fear mechanisms, protection mechanisms, because if it stops relating to life's experience from the fear space and instead in those protection ways, but instead like allows us to relate to all of life, zooming out, zooming in, and just connecting with everything through ultimate presence and through the soul, which is the deepest parts of our psyche, like the essence of who we are that we're spending all these years and practices trying to like bring to the surface. Yeah.
Yeah, beautifully said, brother. Beautifully said. Yeah, I really love that, man. They've played such a pivotal role on my journey as well, and many of the ways that you spoke of. And yeah, man, it's been such a beautiful conversation. And yeah, I'd love to, anything else on your mind that you want to touch on?
We're wrapping up.
Yeah, we could wrap up in the next few minutes or so.
Okay.
But yeah, like I'd absolutely love if you would share. I know you're doing some coaching right now, and you've been posting a lot of content, and I believe you have a website too.
Yeah.
I'd love for you to just tell the listeners where they could find you, and what are you building?
Yeah, I mean, coming back, we didn't touch on it here, but there was an intention to, I think, but to touch on this like realm of escapism and hiding.
Yeah, we got time, brother.
Okay. Like escapism, we can call it addiction, bad habits, destructive habits. Escapism takes so many faces, and really what it is, like if I had to distill it, is down to like, it's back to like the authenticity, the authentic relating. It's hiding from ourselves, hiding ourselves from life, which maybe means we're hiding our pain. Maybe we're hiding our limitations. And in my journey, I've used alcohol, I've used pornography, I've used cocaine, I've used MDMA, I even used mushrooms and LSD to escape my problems. I've used partners, I've used sex, girlfriends, dating, I've used friends, I've used work, I've used, so many things, Instagram, Netflix, whatever, video games, back in the day, to like run away, to hide, to not deal with the discomfort that I was facing. And that kind of goes back to, like the suffering as a trailhead, like there's stuff there for you, if there's pain and discomfort, like for me in my life, like when all the pain and discomfort was there, it was calling for my attention, and I just tried to run from it. But since I've, shifted, and now I go into it, I look at it and I work with it. I walk through the fire, through my darkness. That's the way to like the things that I want the most, like, I could be like, I want like, a house with land and a big family, and, maybe a nice car. Maybe I want to be part of a community. I want to work like my income to be in exchange for like the work of my heart. I want to be more creative. All these things, like, yeah, those can come to me, but also like I need to deal with this stuff too. So like I like to look at it like, if I'm running from my problems, I'm also running from my dreams, because they're just obstacles and they're just in the way. And escapism is a way to not face those things. And they go hand in hand, and it's the problems or discomfort rather, like nothing really needs to be fixed. They just need to be dealt with, and whatever that means, they need to be experienced. And maybe it's grief, maybe it's credit card debt, maybe it's feelings of unworthiness, maybe it's, I don't know, there's so many different things it could be. But my life, my reason for escaping has been because early on, I think I've just been working on healing and mending and improving and nourishing and cultivating a more beautiful relationship with myself. Because I heard this once and it really stuck with me. It's like, I've never had the only toxic relationship I've ever had is the one with myself. All other relationships have been a reflection of that. Whether it was me with my ex-girlfriend, my relationship with alcohol, my relationship with pornography, my relationship to cannabis, to social media, like whatever it is, whatever the outlet is, my relationship to that is always a reflection of how I relate to myself. And that includes how I deal with challenges in my life, how I deal with uncomfortable emotions, what I choose to do with my time, who do I choose to spend my time with, how much time am I giving to myself to just be still and not have to do something so I can actually catch up on, reflections. What kind of practices am I doing? What am I eating? Healthy things, like there's this infinite,
Yeah.
You want to say something?
Yeah, that's why I was going to say, that's why I love the word escapism so much, because we hear addiction a lot. And addiction seems to put the emphasis on the substance and the dependency, the chemical dependency, as if, it's, really about that relationship itself with the substance.
Mm-hmm.
But it's almost like when you break that, if you don't heal that relationship with yourself, you pick up something else.
Yeah.
And, we look at all these things and it's like, oh, you can't be, addicted to this, that, the other thing. Oh, it's not possible. You can't get addicted to that. But it's really goes as deep as escaping with the simple things, even like food, like even, just social media, even just, things that aren't drugs where you do develop a chemical dependency, but the simple things that we're escaping ourselves from. So I love that model of the world of addiction, of escapism, and that's why I love that word escapism so much. And I know Gabor Mate has a really beautiful framework on that. It all kind of stems from self.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, man, when I gave up drinking, I leaned on my partner at the time to make me feel good instead of alcohol. You know, I used her. I was addicted to her and her love. That's what I was addicted to after I put the alcohol down.
Mm-hmm.
But something too that you touched on was like the healing element of recovery, and I've watched personally. I've healed so many things around, or I've loved on so many parts of myself that used to be wounded and uncomfortable that actually led me to drinking and escaping. And as a result, the things that I used to be addicted to, I don't have power over me anymore. Like I used to be age 25 through 29. I had already been drinking 10 years at that point when I turned 25, increasingly. But for those 4 or 5 years, I was working in a restaurant, working in a bar, and I was drinking every day, at least 3 drinks, 2 drinks at work at the minimum, and then maybe a drink after work. And then on my days off, I would have like 5, 8, 10, 12, 14 drinks. I would also be, putting powders up my nose and doing other things to stay up all night and escape and just to like try to feel good, because I didn't know how to feel good if I was still, because I had all these things that I wasn't dealing with. But now, after some traveling and I need to make some money and support myself, and it's the way I know how to make money quickly is I'm bartending now, and I'm also absorbing the energy of that culture too, which is really fascinating to be reflected back to me. But I don't feel powerless around alcohol. Mm-hmm. So I used to be so consumed by it in so many ways, but now, through the healing, I'm reflected back, and the healthier relationship I have with myself, I'm reflected back the results, which is like, I'm like, it's funny, like it's cool. I can look at this. I'm surrounded by some really high quality, delicious things that I don't really care about or want. I don't feel called to consume them. I don't need to run away from them. And I just also want to say too here, like, this isn't, I don't want to like shame anyone who drinks, because I don't see anything necessarily wrong with it. I don't see anything wrong with alcohol itself. I had a moment like last year where I was going through the like darkest time of my life for, in like 2 months, I struggled with pain and grief, and like touched on my core wound. And then there was a point where I was like, you know, I'm just going to have a fucking beer and eat a bunch of brownies. And it was actually healing. Like, it was a relief. And then I was like, cool. Great. I felt recharged, and I took the next like months to like, felt like I took a break from all the intense work I was doing. So it can serve a purpose, but how a teacher once said to me, like, can you consume it consciously? How much consciousness can you bring to the relationship you have with this thing?
Yeah. So much depends on that. And yeah, I drink too, you know, very occasionally, but once in a while. And I used to be a bit of an alcoholic myself. And as you spoke to, you know, that point when your relationship kind of changes, and that's been, you know, some of my favorite moments of just like, you know, that feel like pure victory, when it's like, you know, you kind of like return to, you know, maybe doing something, or maybe it's a substance, and you're like, wait, I don't feel the power that this thing used to have over me.
Yeah.
It used to be this like massive kind of crutch, and now it's just kind of like, oh, like, you know, this is here, and I don't feel a pull to it at all. And it's like it's a reflection of, you know, that relationship with self that's changed. You know, it's you know, it was never really about the thing itself. It's about what we're avoiding inside. You know.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And that's, you know, the word integration. I mean, that's so much of what that is too, is integrating the parts that were hurting, that were neglected, into this current version. So they're not left behind. So they're not going to drive the train and drive the ship into like going and numbing out. They're here, and they're accounted for, and they feel good. They don't feel hurting anymore. So it's like, all right, cool, we're good.
Yeah,
we're more whole now. Great, we can act from a more grounded place.
Yeah, beautiful, man. I'm glad you brought that back up, because escapism is, you know, one of my favorite topics to chat about, you know, and I know you've gotten deep in those realms of escapism and healing from that.
Yeah, but you know, we're all trying to figure out what it means to live a good way, live a good life, live right. And escaping can also be a good thing. You know, sometimes it's important to, in some ways, it's good to defocalize. It's good to take a break, take a breather if like we're just constantly grinding and things. But how much, like I said, how much consciousness can we bring to the table? Or like, cool, yeah, I'm gonna go not think about something for a day. I need to just turn my brain off for a day. Great, so I can actually get back to work, because I've been grinding myself down to the ground. Like we don't need to do that. But there's healthier ways to do it too that'll serve in the long run. Like, man, I hit the roller rink and hit the, like, you know, rollerblade for a few hours, and that feels like an escape, because I'm just like flowing and having fun. But you know, if I choose to escape by putting some things in my body that carry a toll and numb me, and takes me 4 days to recover, maybe it's not such a good idea.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note something, you know, that's been an important switch for me is like, you know, there's two kinds of rest. Like there's active rest and there's passive rest. And, you know, we could take that day off and just kind of do it really unconsciously, and, you know, stop all work, but just kind of let our unconscious take over, where we're just, you know, eating terribly and, you know, scrolling on the phone and just, you know, doing different things like that. Or we could choose to actively rest, you know, to let go of those pressures from hustling, from, you know, that hustle culture, but, you know, to actively rest, you know, in ways like I'm just going to lay in bed awake for an hour and do nothing, and like, you know, really have like active rest like that. And I just wanted to make that distinction, because it's been important for me. And I do agree that, you know, there's, you know, I fall into pits of scrolling, and, you know, maybe I'll use a substance here or there to, you know, when that does come up to escape, and maybe that's good for me. sometimes. Maybe it's not. But yeah, I just wanted to make that distinction because active rest has been, such a game changer for me. Like, is this rest I'm getting depleting me, or is this rest I'm getting like nourishing me?
That's a great point, man. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think, that's bringing more consciousness to the recovery, the reset. I was going to say something.
Yeah. Well,
go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if you think of it, feel free to speak it. But yeah, where can the people find you, brother? Like I said, you're doing such incredible work in the world, and Tomas is someone who really shows up. Really shows up. I can vouch for him. He's really a good man and a shining example of someone doing the work.
Really appreciate that. Thank you, brother.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so before I share that, this idea, I want to talk about this idea I have of darkness. And this kind of coincides with everything that I'm about to share. Like, we're dealing with our darkness. Some people call it demons. I don't like to use that word anymore. I used to. I think it's not really actually, it's missing the mark a little bit. And it's applying a judgment we don't need to. But darkness to me is like pockets of our deep psyche that are neglected light. And that's it. And I kind of I've grown to see us as personalities as mosaics, like this, like just being built and composed of infinite versions of ourselves, all working together as in how we express ourselves is like which parts are integrated and which parts are not. So if there's this creative part that's been neglected, it's going to start acting out, and it is maybe in a destructive way. So the darkness itself doesn't imply a negative, like the shadow. It doesn't imply a negative aspect of ourselves. However, if it's untended to, if it's unconscious, if it's neglected, it's repressed, it's going to act out negatively because it wants our attention. And this is where psychedelics play a good role, because they bring them out. They let us see them, because they take away the ego, which learns to repress those parts. So the ego kind of goes back, and then these parts kind of come to the surface, and it's like, oh, dang, yeah, I feel good now. That feels good for you to be here. That part of me. So yeah, so my website and, this kind of like identity piece around it is, the Psychedelic Lighthouse. My website is thepsychedeliclighthouse.com, and that's where you can get a hold of me one way. I kind of feel like I've been a psychedelic human because I've been dabbling in these, medicines for a while, but I also just really love to pull things to the surface, and I really love to, within myself and then also others through reflection. So that's definitely one element of my work is to help people through my own reflections, help them, bring the repressed parts to the surface so they can integrate them and love on them and safely guide them into being part of their current version of themselves. And one thing I offer too is to help people, especially newer on the journey, but that they don't need to be of exploring themselves with psychedelics, because it can bring up a lot of stuff if you don't have the tools or the support network to take care, and it can be quite a struggle, and it can make your life way harder than it needs to be.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that.
And harder than it was. And I have experience too. I lived in a medicine community in Costa Rica for 10 months. And I was doing a couple ceremonies a month, and I wasn't really doing much to integrate it. I just was under this spell that the medicine was going to take care of all my problems kind of in a way. And it's all good and this and that, which for sure the medicine always helps, like ayahuasca it cleanses the body, it cleanses toxins, it It can help you have cathartic releases. I mean, I had a great potent relationship or a potent ceremony where I released so much healing and healed so much around my relationship that I have with my mother in a really beautiful way. It was profound, and that changed my life in so many ways. And also, though, if I was just relying on these things, and it brought me to a point of stumbling and falling down because I wasn't walking myself. I was relying on something else outside of me. So I was actually, ironically, perhaps using medicines like ayahuasca to escape. But, I've had, so a lot of the work that I've, been diving into more and more is to use them as, guiding posts, is to use the psychedelics as lighthouses for myself, to figure out like the next move I need to make, but also like, resourcing myself to feel comfortable enough to lean into the discomfort and to make the changes that are important, and to face the fears and to release shame and hiding, and just to become, more fuller, truer, contributing, caring, loving, compassionate, thriving humans. Yeah.
Beautiful, brother.
Yeah, my Instagram handle with my coaching page is Tomas_Trueno. Trueno is the Spanish word for thunder. Trueno. And yeah, that's definitely, those are the best ways to find me and things I'm putting out there for now.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for coming on, man. Real quick, I just want to revisit something you said. You said darkness was it rejected light?
Repressed.
Darkness as repressed light.
It's a darkness is like, what I said was it's a pocket of the psyche that has been neglected light.
Neglected light. Okay. Because when you said that, I was like, that's really beautiful. And I see that. So I just wanted to like re-emphasize that.
And light, the word light, can be interchangeable with awareness, and more beautifully loving awareness. Like, because if there's a part that we're maybe aware of, we don't love it, we're just gonna push it down. But like, early on in the development of ego, or at certain earlier developmental stages, that you can push these parts down, so then we become unaware because it's just like who we came to be. So bringing light to those dark pockets of the psyche, just loving on them, and whatever they need, and whatever they need to express, allows them to be liberated, and we become unburdened, and then we become more ourselves. Yeah.
Beautifully said, brother. Thank you so much again for coming on, man.
Yeah, man.
Honored to have these conversations with you, and we're always having conversations like this, so it's beautiful, man. Just looking forward to following along this journey with you, bro.
Yeah, brother. Thank you so much for inviting me here, man. It's a little nervous at moments, but
yeah,
it's good. It's good too,
bro.
It's good too. So
thanks for listening, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Oh.